Hey guys, Montel here, and thanks so much for tuning in to this special edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Getting information out there and making sure people are aware of cannabis and the fact that cannabis has been around and been a part of, mankind's, equal evolution for the last 2,700 years minimum, um, is something that is really important. I think looking at the history of cannabis and trying to figure out why cannabis is, looked at the way it is, I think is something that we really need to do. And we need to make sure that we get as much awareness in the public as we possibly can. And there's multiple ways to do that. There's television specials. You've seen Sanjay Gupta do specials, and there's podcasts like Let's Be Blunt, and there's hundreds of other podcasts out there trying their best to at least give the general public some basic knowledge about cannabis. And our guest today, literally went after doing the same thing, but doing it in a little bit of a different way. My guests today are performing artists. They are here to talk about their new multimedia theatrical production entitled Cannabis of Viper Vaudeville. The performance will run from January 8th to January 15th, 2022 at the Ellen Stewart Theatre in New York City. The performance is co-presented with Here, La Mama Experimental Theatrical Club, and Prototype Opera Theater Now. Baba Israel and Grace Galu, welcome so much, and welcome. Thank you so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel.
Hello, thank you for having us. We're so honored to be here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, and I love the way you set up that intro, because that's right on target for where we're coming from as artists and trying to complement this collective effort to raise awareness, history, present, and where we're going in the future too.
Absolutely, it's really important. I think one of the things that I talk about quite a bit on this podcast is the fact that I think that the industry has done itself in some ways a disservice in that we focus so much in the last 4 or 5 years on B2B, business to business, but we've really kind of neglected the consumer, and the consumer needs to have knowledge so that they can make a decent choice and make a decent decision for their family if in fact this is something that they want to venture down the path of. Before we get started going into detail about the play, I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about you both individually. Baba, well, let's start with you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you to this initiative?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the counterculture. My parents were both part of a theater company called the Living Theater. They were a, radical political theater company. My parents were involved in the 60s and 70s. They were involved with, civil rights activism, anti-war activism, and cannabis was a part of their process. They were connected to the jazz community, and my father started as a jazz musician, and cannabis was how you got into your rehearsal process. It was part of your creative process. So, I grew up around cannabis and always knew that it was something that was not what, Nancy Reagan was telling us, that there was another story. My parents gave me that insight. My dad used to tell me about Louis Armstrong and how he used cannabis back in the day, and, and just dismissing some of the propaganda. So I feel lucky in the sense that I grew up kind of knowing some of these real stories. But also, feeling concerned about, because growing up, it's still, the taboo was huge. The stakes in New York were tough in terms of people in our community getting arrested. And, so I think there was a mixture of feelings. And, I think for a long time, I kind of kept, some of my cannabis advocacy. That was something I was concerned about doing in my younger years, because I worked as an educator. I worked in schools. I worked, bringing arts education. And I was concerned, like, how would I be perceived? But at a certain point, I felt like I had to really, and this is going back, 6-7 years ago, I felt like I had to really bring my artistry forward, because, I was a caregiver for my mother, and, cannabis became a huge way of how I managed her dementia. And, at that point, I thought, this is something that's just, very on a personal level, I got to talk about this, and I got to, just take a stand.
But then what made you think about it from the perspective of putting together an off-Broadway play?
Yeah, I mean, it is. How do you go from there to there? Well, I'll tell you, to be honest, a great author, journalist named Martin Lee, who is the executive director of Project CBD, which is a wonderful information site. He wrote a great book called Smoke Signals: The Social, Cultural, history of cannabis. It goes into the scientific, and our human relationship is 10,000 years old, and there's 4,000, it's documented in Chinese traditional medicine like 4,000 years ago. So, I read this book that, I actually bumped into Martin in a coffee shop in Amsterdam, in a place called the 420 Cafe. And he shared his book with me. And when I read his book, it's basically a journey through cannabis history, but through activists, through artists, people like Louis Armstrong, like Allen Ginsberg, like Bob Dylan, like Bob Marley. And it sort of takes you through these political movements and times. And when I read the book, my imagination, I thought there's so much great music connected to cannabis. There are so many important political stories, activist stories, human stories. This could be a stage show. And I reached out to Martin. I said, how do you feel about me taking your book and turning it into a performance? And he gave me his blessing. I got into the studio to record the first song, invited Grace in to come and sing. And then boom.
The rest was history.
Yeah, that's where it began.
Wow. Yeah. And Grace, what's your background?
So I'm from New York City as well, and I am mixed race. I'm Black mixed race. My father's from the Congo and my mother's Irish. And I came from a very different background, very conservative, Irish Catholic, went to school and was lied to about cannabis. But I am epileptic, and I have used cannabis for a long time for medication, but also for stress reduction. And I feel like it's important for those who revere these characters and figures in music to understand that those people are also cannabis users, advocates, and have been subjugated under discrimination of their use of the plant. So drawing those, excuse me.
Okay, go ahead.
Just drawing those connections, I didn't know that about Louis Armstrong, and my parents loved Louis Armstrong and they played him all the time in our home. I don't think they knew that he was a cannabis user. So I think drawing those connections between the people we love and their use of cannabis is really powerful through music.
Well, I think it's really interesting when you say they didn't know about Louis Armstrong. But most people don't know about the fact that we look at America and people believe that America was built on tobacco and and cotton, but America was built on the back of hemp.
Yep,
I mean, this nation would not even be here if it were not for hemp. I mean, the fact that the sails that Christopher Columbus had on his boat were made from hemp. The ropes that they used on the boat were made from hemp. The clothing that they actually put on when they got here to the new land was hemp-based clothing. And you look back at the Revolutionary Army, and the entire Revolutionary Army was clothed in hemp fiber clothing. So we don't really even begin to understand how important hemp was and cannabis was to the entire fabric of America.
Literally. Yeah, literally. The fabric. That's right. That's a great part.
Yeah, people don't understand. The word cannabis is the reason why we have a word called canvas.
Right.
People don't understand. They just don't. So,
yep.
You. How did the two of you end up? Well, I know you reached out, Baba, to Grace to come in and sing a song, but where was your head, Grace, when he said, I'm thinking about putting together a off-Broadway play?
Well, at the time, I didn't know what this would become. This was really, we did so many works in progress, and this was a concert, and then it became so many things. There were so many different developments where this play or this concert, this theatrical concert is a term that we're using. We didn't know what it was going to be, but we just kept working on the music. And we worked with a dramaturge and a director, and it came to fruition. But at the time, it was just literally an outpouring of feeling, emotion, tension. We worked on this piece mostly during the Trump administration. So there was some confrontation there, and we didn't know that New York was going to be legal by the time we presented this piece. So we were doing this with also the tension of how is this going to affect our livelihoods, our connection with the parents of the students that we teach, how is this going to affect my relationship with my own family.
Right. And did your family, let me talk a little bit more to you, Grace, about this issue. My daughter, just for complete disclosure, was a adolescent epileptic herself, and has found, especially in recent years, she had a tough journey from being diagnosed and going through her, later teen years and early 20s. But then once she got off of a lot of the Western medications that were really doing her more harm than I think were doing her good, and started focusing on cannabis as a tool to help her deal with her seizures. she now lives a life that is, pretty much Western medication drug free, but she still does from occasions uses cannabis to help her when she thinks that, she might be, and fortunately for her, hers was adolescent onset epilepsy
Mm,
that she didn't grow out of, but it has lessened as she's gotten older, which
that's
has
wonderful.
been really good and wonderful for her. But it's still there. It's always in the back, and so she battles and uses cannabis to help contain that. Talk a little bit about your cannabis journey when it comes to seizures and things like that.
I was smoking cannabis before that for reasons of trauma, for reasons of relaxation. I started smoking cannabis in high school with my Catholic school girlfriends. And I didn't really understand the power of it medicinally until I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And at that time, there was a lot of confusion about what was I experiencing and what was going to help it. And what really it came down to was eating. So I wasn't really able to eat after seizures, and I lost my appetite, and I wasn't able to sleep. So that's when I really started using cannabis more heavily to monitor and to prevent my seizures. But it's not a perfect science, and we're looking at, okay, what are the best terpenes, what are the best strains, what is going to help in the long run. But I would love for the world to be so accepting of cannabis that this research could be more um, just more open and more public and more well known. I think there needs to be a lot more research about how to monitor and to treat epilepsy with cannabis.
But
But
I
I
think, well, let me just add to that. I don't know if you've seen recently that Normal just put out a brand new book. People don't understand, I'm not saying this in any way, shape, or form to counter what it is you're saying,
Mhm.
but we keep asking for. And I recently sat down and watched, the sixth installment of, parts of the sixth installment of Sanjay Gupta's special on cannabis, where he actually addresses, seizures and other, he's talking about other spectrum diseases or illnesses. And there was a doctor on and said, "Well, but we really need to have more research." Well, every time I hear that come out of somebody's mouth, it angers me because there has been more research done on cannabis in the last 10 years than any other drug, any other substance on the planet. Over 20,000 peer-reviewed, published documents are out there right now. And when it comes
Right.
to epilepsy, I got to tell you, girlfriend, I mean, honestly, if you just do a little bit more digging yourself, you know, Google, get up there online and start looking at it. You're going to find there's probably about 2,500 different peer-reviewed, published documents from doctors talking about the efficaciousness of cannabinoids in cannabis when it comes to seizure maladies. And so, what's going on, and this is what angers me about the medical community, is that they claim there's no research. No, there's no research being done by them.
Right.
Doctors are always supposed to continue medical education. That's why they
Right.
have things that are called CMEs. Doctors are supposed to study. They don't just graduate from college, get a degree, and walk out the door and think they know everything. Well, I'm sorry,
They might.
that's what they do. But what
Right.
they should be doing is when they graduate, they should be looking for the next peer-reviewed, published document so that they can educate themselves.
Right.
And if they
I'm
educated themselves, I wouldn't say there's not enough research out there. I'm not saying that because I think you think there's not enough research out there, but girlfriend, there is research out there right now
I
that
meant more specifically, Montel, that there isn't enough research in my specific ailment in terms of epilepsy and where it is in my frontal lobe, and then exactly what strains pertain to that. So I just meant personal research in terms of the ability to access medical cannabis, the ability to monitor how I'm reacting to it. I didn't mean in general in the medical
no,
community. I
no,
just meant specifically to my case.
I'm interviewing a doctor today, later on today, that has done, I think it's close to, 15,000 patients that have gone through, and he's probably got a long list of patients that have some form of seizure malady, that
Mm,
in his research in collecting data has put together data, real world data of
mm,
individuals who might not, you might come across the fact that some of his patients have similar symptoms to you, but what he's been doing has been documenting the strains and things that actually work for his patients and then
right.
sharing it with others. So I don't mean to say it's not an aspersion. I just say that the information is there.
It's
I
about
agree
access.
with you. It's about access, and it's also about someone putting it together in a way that makes it easily or much more easily digestible by all the masses.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I've seen numerous neurologists, and they are often opposed to cannabis when I mention it.
That's the challenge.
And I also, as a performer, I don't have great health insurance. Let me put that out there. I don't have great health insurance. I'm not rich. I often am on the line in a clinic. I've waited in Bellevue for 6 hours to be seen by a neurologist, and then they already left the building. So I'm often just getting what I can get in terms of treatment. And
Sure.
it's often because of the stigma of cannabis, because I'm a Black woman, I get treated differently.
Yeah.
As soon as I say I use cannabis, as soon as they see it in my blood work, they start treating me differently. So I know it's out there, but accessing those doctors is not something that's easily accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that's something that's got to stop. We've got to figure out a way to make America wake up, but I don't think it's going to happen until, pretty much a generation of physicians dies off, gets out of the business, get out of the way. That's my view on it,
I
because
mean, yeah.
some of them are just diehard trying to, keep their from. No, it doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. And all the information that they have is false information anyway.
No, it's true. I mean, one of the good things, at least with the MRTA, the new legalization in New York, I'm hopeful that it will allow for some change. For example, my mother's currently in recovering in a rehab center, and at first they were very close to cannabis, but not necessarily from a medical perspective. They were closed, that their hands were tied. The doctors actually were actually very open-minded, and they actually said, you know what, we think it actually could be really useful for seniors and could replace a lot of very toxic pharmaceuticals. But because of the nature of the previous medical laws, they were not allowed to access any of the medical program. With the new rollout of legalization in New York State now, it means that those kind of facilities, and it means that any doctor who can prescribe a controlled substance can now prescribe cannabis. So that opens up the field in New York, and and hopefully, but it's a policy thing and it's a culture thing, and they have to happen simultaneously. And I think that's part of why we're making this production, is we know that arts and culture are a way that human beings, we learn through storytelling. We learn, that's where we really, things get into us. But when we do our run, we're going to have a panel discussion after. We're doing 10 shows. Sometimes we're ending with a DJ dance party. Sometimes we're ending with a cipher with guest rappers, and sometimes we're ending with panel discussions so that we can really share information, educate. And we have one panel that's really focused on the importance of maintaining and also documenting the existing research. And we've got a research institute. We've got a practicing medical doctor. We've got, folks from the National Cannabis Party, who I know, Safita, who I know you've interviewed, I believe, in the past.
I happen to be. They just asked me to be the chairman of the board for the National Cannabis Party.
Wonderful.
So, taking on that role.
Congratulations. Well, they're going to be representing at our run, and Safita's coming to talk about her experience as a caregiver, as a mother. So we're gonna, we're trying to hit this on different levels and angles. And one of the stories that we really focus on in the second act of the show is is Dennis Perron, and the story of how cannabis around AIDS activism and around the AIDS crisis, that was really one of the moments where, the first moment of a legal dispensary, and and the risks that those folks took. People like Brownie Mary, who was this incredible woman who would, who was in her 70s and would bake, these brownies and bring them to the AIDS patients so they would, ease their suffering, help them deal with nausea, help them deal with the wasting, help them eat, and she went to jail in her 70s. They arrested her, and, I wrote a song about her life, and then Grace turned it into this blues that will just knock you out of the park, and so we're using music to bring these stories to life in a way that, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it on an emotional level, through the music.
Well, I was going to ask you, tell me a little bit more. Tell me more about the theatrical project, Cannabis.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of, the interesting, vaudeville is a complex word with a complex history, but what's interesting about it, it's like truly an American form, and it's a variety show, right? It allows for you to go anywhere. Now, a lot of vaudeville had issues with racism, so that's something we're trying to subvert that, and really make sure that all of the work is coming from a place of working towards progress, of working towards justice, but it allows us a lot of freedom. So we go to every genre of music that you can imagine.
We start with the ancient Scythians, and then we end with a hip hop cipher. So we go from ancient times to modern times, and we use the remix, the hip hop remix, to sort of give a taste of what this sounded like in the past, but also give a new lens, a new ear to all of this music.
Yeah, we play, we reimagine a classic Ella Fitzgerald song, and then I ended up adapting some of the lyrics to challenge Anslinger. It's sort of written as a song. If Ella sang a song to challenge Anslinger in the 30s, and to call him out. So it's like, but we use that aesthetic of the jazz at that time, and we're working also with them. Yeah, please.
When it comes to Anslinger, I mean, I'm glad you did that, because a lot of people don't know that Anslinger was a proponent and supported cannabis during prohibition for alcohol. People don't know that. He spoke about the fact that cannabis was less violent. He spoke about the fact that it was something that people wanted to do, something that was going to help them, get some euphoria. You should do cannabis instead of drinking, because drinking would lead you down the devil's path and lead you down the path of beating women and all these kinds of things. It wasn't until prohibition was lifted for alcohol that Anslinger turned to cannabis, because at that point in time, he wanted to make sure that all them darkies who he thought were responsible for bringing it in here needed to be put in jail. And that's
right.
It over. It had nothing to do with his, disdain for cannabis. As a matter of fact, he was a supporter. It just was when he lost his job, basically, as a lead prohibitionist for alcohol. He needed to find another way to keep himself getting paid.
Getting paid. And also, and like you said, it's definitely deeply tied to institutional systemic racism, anti-Mexican xenophobia as well, because after the Mexican Revolution, you had Mexican folks coming back into Texas, back into Southern California, and then those were the first laws, even before Anslinger got his his tax change in the late 30s. In 1913, 1914, they were criminalizing Mexican folks, and they were calling it loco weed. And as we know too, cannabis was sold legally in pharmacies all across America in the 1800s, and there was
people were eating hemp seeds and
hemp seeds, tincture, all of the CBD, that was all happening. I mean,
there's also a correlation with Jim Crow.
That's
so
also
how do we get Black labor for free? Right. So
absolutely.
we have to incarcerate Black people. How do we go about that?
Correct.
So we use music to tell these stories, and we feel like as legalization is rolling out, it's like we can't forget this history. We cannot just whitewash it and throw it under the rug. And so we know that music, theater, performance is a way to do it, and so we the first half of the show really takes us, each song moves us forward in time. We have a whole song dealing with Pancho Villa and the Mexican Revolution and the role cannabis played in like La Cucaracha. It's a song that a lot of us grew up singing in school. That was a reefer song. That was a song, the actual lyrics were that if we don't have, the cockroaches were the people, the soldiers in the Mexican Revolution. They said, if we don't have our marijuana, we're not marching. We're not marching. That was the original meaning of that song. So we use these different moments of folklore, of history, to bring that out.
Yes, and also I feel like there's a void in the entertainment industry around cannabis, where I feel like the modern paradigm or the main tropes are very male dominated, very sort of zany, frivolous, slapstick. I haven't seen anything in the entertainment industry that represents the story of cannabis that I've lived through, or that I see historically that we've lived through, the suffering and the nuance, the celebration of the plant, but also the nuance. It's always about finding a burger or a magic joint. And I actually find that degrading. So I think we needed to have a piece that really had some reverence.
Well, I think, when you look back at Rick James, when he did Mary Jane, most people think he was singing a song about a girlfriend, and he was singing a song about cannabis. That's what he was.
That's our encore song, by the way. We do a cover of that for the encore.
Don't give it away.
Sorry about that. and just to say too, we're working with some incredible dancers, and a group called Urban Bushwomen, who are world-renowned dance company based out of Brooklyn, and also a dancer called Raka James, who's a crumper. So they're using their bodies to bring these stories to life, and it's a real connection between music and movement. And so they're time traveling, with their bodies as well, and remixing movement. So it's sometimes, it feels like you're in the 30s, but then we flip and we're in present time. And, and then the second half of the show really deals with this issue of celebrating the, cannabis as a medicine. There's storytelling around the issue, experience of veterans and PTSD, and the role that cannabis can play in veterans' lives, which is, we feel, a very important story to tell. And we've been connecting with an activist called Leo Bridgewater, who has done a lot of advocacy around getting access to cannabis for veterans. And, he's going to come and speak at one of the nights. So, it's really this blend between performance and education, edutainment, as they say.
But it's also you're doing something that's called a multimedia performance. Right?
Oh,
Explain
yeah.
that to people who don't understand what multimedia performance means.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll touch on things and feel free to add to it. But I mean, we're having a stage built for our show. We're working with a wonderful set designer called Nick Banassa Raff, and then we're collaborating with a lighting designer named Tuche, and then a video designer named David Bengali. We have 20-foot projection screens behind us. And so, we're gonna there's video being designed to support the storytelling. Sometimes it's really amazing imagery that just adds to the feeling of music, but sometimes it's very specific imagery. So multimedia is really about bringing together the elements of music, storytelling, poetry, rap, song, dance, video, and lighting, sound design. So we have a full creative design team. So this is an immersive experience. We have a team of people creating cannabis plants, that are, there's going to be these sculptural cannabis plants throughout the space. There's going to be, a giant cannabis disco ball, like disco leaf. There's going to be, all kinds of immersive lighting effects. We're looking at, having terpenes so that when you come into the room, you smell the smell of cannabis. We're going to be working with fog and haze. So it's going to be an immersive experience. The audience will be able to both sit and watch. There'll also be areas where audience can dance, and there'll be a dance floor. So it's going to be, an immersive multimedia experience, multi-sensory, because that's what the plant is. The plant tunes your senses, a lot. That's why artists have been so attracted to this plant, is it heightens your senses. It heightens your visual perception, your auditory perception. That's, it really makes your senses come alive. So as artists, that's what we want to do. We want your senses to come alive when you come to see this piece.
It's not only artists who believe that, but scientists and others. Remember, I mean, there are those.
It's true.
For a fact. I mean, when they finally scraped out Benjamin Franklin's pipe that was in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., they found that homeboy wasn't just sucking away on tobacco. We know that he had a little hemp in that pipe along.
That's
with,
right.
I think there's information that suggests that Albert Einstein, who's considered the greatest mind of the last century, literally used cannabis to help open up his mind also.
So, a lot of scientists have used cannabis in their to get themselves into an open frame of mind, to get themselves to hyper focus. Some of these things probably many years ago might have been helpful in hunting, but now we can apply them, to creativity, to science, to innovation. So
getting yourself to write an email.
What are some of the major takeaway messages at this project that are most important to you?
Well, one is that this could easily go backwards. So we're making progress forwards, but we have to remember what was and how recent that was, so that we stay vigilant, so that we can celebrate the plant and celebrate the success of legalization in New York City and around the United States and also in other places in the world. But we have to remain vigilant and protect this plant and stay active and not become complacent. So that's one major thing. You have.
I think just to echo what you're saying there, I think one of the things that we're starting to see nationally is that unfortunately, this industry doesn't understand how to keep itself sustainable either. We've got some people in this industry, I think, that are doing some really unscrupulous things, like trying to take a plant-based medicine and literally apply other chemicals to it to create derivatives that are only going to do one thing, and add up the naysayers on our heads. I mean, there's this crap that's out there now. It's THC8 and THCO. These are chemicals that aren't naturally formed chemicals, though they are released through a chemical process. They are chemical, constituents of the cannabis plant that, when it comes to THCO, there's anywhere from, it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4, maybe more times more powerful than standard THC delta 9. And then, what's going to end up happening is somebody's going to take that, have a really bad experience, and that's going to give the DEA an excuse to come down on the entire head of the entire industry. So I applaud you for at least trying to make sure that people understand that we've got to be vigilant and pay attention not only to what's happening outside of our industry, what's happening inside the industry.
Absolutely. And we know that the plant had, you know, eons to evolve into what it is, and the natural evolution of the plant created a balance within it. So when we find that people are creating higher THC levels in plants by breeding, we also find that that is not balanced enough. We need some more CBD in there.
Yeah, no, it's an entourage effect. I remember once I was at this presentation, there was a wonderful cannabis scientist there. His name escapes me, but he was saying, a drug is when you extract a single chemical compound. Cannabis is an herb with a complex matrix of chemical compounds that all, regulate each other. So I think, another important message of the show is an end to the war on drugs. It's just like that is a clear message that we need, not just an end on the war on cannabis, but we need a new way of addressing drug policy in our country, and we need to stop criminalizing folks for that reason, because we know it's disproportionate to communities of color, whatever substance it is, when we look through our history in this country. So ending the war on drugs, valuing and affirming cannabis as a medicine, as something that's used by families, by caregivers, that this is not an illicit substance, challenging that dogma, celebrating the artists and activists and the musical genres that are connected to cannabis. So, just a bit of some joy and lift up. We have a song called "Who Are the Heroes," like acknowledging people who took risks, the people who have taken the risks that have gotten us here. And to also remember that this show can be, eventually we're going to tour this production. And the sort of vision is wherever we tour it to, we'll always have local panelists, local activists, local speakers. The show ends every night with a call to action. So every night we have a different activist who comes on after the last song and gives a 5-minute call to action. We're going to have tables with information. So we look forward to, as we take the show around the country, connecting with different grassroots groups. I'm involved with New York City Normal here. We're connected to different Normal chapters around the states.
I suggest you should hook up with Last Prison Project also, which is
absolutely, yeah, Steve D'Angelo.
Steve D'Angelo's organization. I work with them rather closely, and they're doing some really, really phenomenal work. And that was a question I was going to ask you, because it seems like the show right now is on a limited run. It's an experimental stage, but you plan on knocking out the kinks between the 8th and the 15th, and then
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. No, we have big visions for this show. We really feel like, we got a very prestigious grant for this production, and it's been amazing we got some New York State funding, so the New York State, Council on the Arts has funded a show about cannabis. So that's progress. We also received
Are you worried because we're sitting here in the day of COVID, and right now you're open, but who knows what's going to happen next month?
And we have that in mind, and once the show is created, the show exists, and if it has to exist later on, then that's what we'll do. And we'll be slightly heartbroken because this has been 5 years leading up to this moment. But the show exists, and the show can go on in different forms, in different venues, at different times.
Yeah, I think all performing artists feel vulnerable at this time, and many of us, we have friends who are Broadway performers, we have friends who are jazz musicians, every element of performing arts. And so I think we're creating all our protocols and working with the theater to create those structures, and then we'll respond as we have to. But at the moment, our focus is making it happen and then respond accordingly. But we want to take the show across the country. We want to eventually, we have a vision of bringing the show to Broadway. We really feel like it's the time where that kind of space could open up, and we'd love to bring this show to audiences who are new to cannabis, who are new to this culture, and we wanted to we really feel like it has entry points for all kinds of folks. We did an early version in Colorado a couple of years ago, and our audience, the audience that came was 20 to 70. And that was a beautiful thing. We really feel like it's a subject that touches so many lives and cuts across so many lines. And it's a subject that can bring folks together. And so, yeah, we're hopeful, realistic, and optimistic.
Well, where can people go to get more information, number one, and where can people go to get tickets?
Absolutely. So if you go to prototypefestival.org, I believe is the site. Let me just double confirm that. Yep, that's right. Prototypefestival.org. And then you'll find, if you look at shows, you'll find Cannabis, a Viper Vaudeville. Viper, just to give people a little insight, was a code word. It was in the jazz era of the 30s and 40s, for folks who were part of the cannabis community. So we wanted to sort of pay honor to that time and that tradition, which was very important to my father, and a word that he taught me when I was pretty young, when he taught me about this jazz musician called Mesro, who was Louis' connection. So we just wanted to give a little insight into that word. But yeah, Prototype Festival, also here.org is a wonderful, that's the website of the theater where we've been in residence. And then our band is called Soul Inscribed, and you can go to soulinscribed.com if you want to learn more about our music and our band.
Great. You want to add anything else? Please add.
I feel like Baba just encompassed everything, that all of the places to go. But I feel so grateful to have this conversation, and I'm in awe of the progress that's been made, and I'm also really invigorated to keep it on.
Yeah, we appreciate you, and it's it's really meaningful that you've been adding your voice for so long to this subject, and just acknowledgement, appreciation for your work as an advocate, as an activist, as someone who's been using your ability to speak out and influence. So just an acknowledgement of that. If you want, we could end with a little something creative. You want, we always like to freestyle.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
love you.
We're so glad to be here with you, talking about cannabis and what is really true, giving you a taste of some history. I want to spread a bunch of seeds, watch them grow and cultivate. I don't want to be filled with hate. We're gonna give you a taste of our show. Baba, do you want to let them know?
Let them know with the flow, because we're being blown with Montel. Cannabis, it's a beautiful substance. We can break it down with the education. This is a freestyle flow, no cannabis but improvisation. Lifting and giving the rhythm and giving the vibration. Shouting out one time, because that's the education participation. So we gotta rock this for justice when I bust this. So Montel, give us a word, give us any word, throw a word into our mix, and then we'll take that word and add it to our lyrics.
Truth. Cannabis truth.
Oh, that's right. We gotta do this for the old, do this for the youth. We gotta take it away, share that truth, because there's proof, it's in the science, it's in the peer review, and we're giving you the map and we're giving you a clue. You can take cannabis and break it up and put side of your stew. Watch out, you can scrape off and get the residue. If you're feeling nauseous, don't feel cautious, just understand the right ratio of THC to CBD and get the energy, because it's a natural remedy and it gives you a state of reverie. Listen to Grace's melody, flowing with the rhythm and the energy. Last time we rock it just like that, so give it the rhythm and break it down.
Plant of the people, the plant of the people, of the people, the plant of the. We have a story to tell of a plant and its spell. We have a story to tell of a plant and its spell.
Here with Montel.
The play, they have to tell you, the play is a Viper Vaudeville, and it runs from January 8th to January 15th in New York City. So make sure you go up on the website. Baba, give it out one more time. Where can they go to get tickets?
Prototypefestival.org.
Prototypefestival.org. Go up online, get your tickets now. Try to get into town and take a look. If things change a little bit because of COVID, well, you'll get the information out to make sure people understand where they can go to see the main new production if in fact it gets postponed a little bit, right?
Absolutely.
Beautiful. We really appreciate you. Appreciate the time. Absolutely. And such a great conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've been able to share. I'm going to make sure people, here at Let's Be Blunt understand what's going on. There's a movement, and that movement is from the ground up, and we need to support it. And thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Let me know. Come on back. Let me know how well it does. Okay.
We'd love to. We'd love to. We appreciate you. All the best.
All the best to you too. You stay safe, you stay well, and you make sure you tune into the next edition of Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments.